feet, yeah.
Right? Okay, but they're really, this is the same lot except for the addition of the,
Except for the exception.
but they were made by different people.
Right.
So, I think we have to go over that and get it clarified. Who made the motion, who seconded the motion, because they're two of the same thing.
Hey.
Thank you, so we need to make an amendment on that to change it.
I think with the town center, we had to then, because, you know, if it doesn't burn down, otherwise nothing can be done.
Oh,
Thank you for my holiday work.
you're welcome. Yeah, glad to get this out of your office.
Thought you dropped that off.
But these, we're meeting with a group of women who are going to sew them. I love when the clock does this.
I think I did a table.
I love when the clock does
Thanks,
that.
I
Joelle.
think I did a
You got it
table
right,
of
girl.
what the
You
proposal
were
is.
going to do the table, but
You did.
this is in the minutes and
You had a
Here,
table.
Joelle.
Okay,
You had a
I'm sorry.
table
Here's
that
your other
we are
paperwork.
giving to Planning Commission at
Judging
their
by the
first
clock,
meeting
this
in
meeting is
January.
over.
right.
Yeah.
Oh,
'Cause I think that reflects the
Wow,
motion.
look at this. We're just talking like aerobically.
Wow.
Wow, time flies, literally.
You were going to correct the table. But the problem is it's the
Definition of
two
time flies.
motions, but they're the same thing except one added an exclusion and they're by two different people.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, pen is here.
Not relying on
Okay.
this clock. Well, we're not going to rely
No,
on that
because
clock. 'cause we can't
time
speak that
is
quickly.
flying today.
Yeah, literally.
Again.
Why is it flying?
Look at
one
the
quick
clock.
minute,
Joe,
one quick meeting.
over here.
Oh, goodness.
Really?
Jeez. Don't do that.
Okay. That's very funny. I'm sure that's what City Council would like to see. Okay, I'm going to call to order at 1:01. I'll give you time to set up the... You're good? I'll wait till you
Recording
get
in
set up.
progress.
Take your time. Take your time. You have like 12 hours. Before we officially start, Janelle, you were very good in the parade. The jobs you all have to do. Okay.
Fun.
All right, I'm going to call the Lewis Planning Commission Environmental Subcommittee to order at 1:02 on December 4th. All right, call to order, public comment. Is there anyone online for a public comment?
Only person was from BPW.
Okay. Any comments? I don't see any public in the room. Let's just go through roll call if we have members of our subcommittee online. Patrick? Melanie? Nope.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. And Brent is here. Charlie coming? Charlie's coming right now. Because we're all going to have to
We have a quorum here.
we
so
have a
we're
quorum. We thought you'd be wearing Eagles attire. Oh, guess not.
good. Boy, did they get thumped.
Oh, that was a painful game.
It sure was.
Yeah, that was nasty. We'll welcome you even if you're not, we thought you'd come with a 49er shirt just to show how, yeah. Okay, let's do some administrative things first, and apologize, a lot of things, everybody's busy during pre-holiday, so I don't know if you want to review the minutes?
I would like to review.
What would you like?
So,
I just need you to use the microphone, please.
Yes, use the microphone.
thank you.
Sorry.
No, don't ever apologize, thank you, because I have to go over these meetings sometimes multiple times. In the minutes that you did not get, because I was struggling with them, we have 3 different motions, I think pertaining to the same thing. So one was, Dennis made a motion for commercial, the 1%, the 0.02%, and the outside floodplain, that applicants who voluntarily raise the freeboard 36 inches may take advantage of adding an at 2 feet additional feet in height. Barbara Curtis, you seconded that motion. Then there was a motion by Barbara Curtis as an incentive to all commercial buildings to elevate for floodplain proofing purposes. If they raise it 18 inches, they may raise the height by 2 feet, except for town center historic, semicolon, and cultural historic may only raise it by 1.5 feet. This was seconded by Melanie Moser. So I believe, if I'm correct, it's the same motion made by different people and seconded by different people, with the exceptions of the town center historic and the cultural historic.
I have a question about the semicolon you
It's not a
put
semicolon.
in
It's
there.
just an and, should be just an and.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought,
It's not a
yeah.
semicolon, should just be an and. It's,
Both of them are limited to only raising their height of the building by 18
But
inches.
in the meeting, that was not said. In the meeting, it was said the town center historic and cultural, the town center historic was totally excluded from this. But the cultural historic may only raise it 1.5 feet.
The Inn at Canal Square, where are they? Are
They're-
they town center historic or no?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. No,
Not, because they're on the other side.
side-
of
it's
the
town
canal
center.
side, yeah, they're on the
It's-
canal side of Pilot Town Road, so they're not
Right.
in the town center.
Okay.
no, it's zone town center, just not town center historic.
Okay.
There's the differences there.
right. So, Joellen, what you're saying is you feel like they're competing motions, the way it sounded?
I think actually it's the same motion with the exception
With a friendly
of the
amendment.
exceptions.
Yeah. I think we should treat it, I mean, we also could just say, we're going to start again and have a clean motion. But I think what was happening is, we went back after we approved and said, wait, we don't really want to do it on town center historic and historic. So it was almost like a friendly amendment after we voted, which isn't proper procedure. So I would recommend, to make it cleaner, that we make the motion today.
I totally agree, thank
Okay.
you.
And so it really is what Joellen has recorded. The key factors are, it's voluntary. That's the most important thing that we came to, and that we gave height increases, except we restricted those in 2 areas, the historic areas, town center and cultural historic. I think it's the church steeple and something else. We just don't want anything else higher at that point, but we did give them a little bit of room, but not much. So if they had to replace their building, if there was a fire or something else, they might have a little more room.
In the meeting, though, what I captured, and I watched the meeting a number of times, we excluded the town center historic completely from any height allocations.
So what's the 1.5?
And the cultural historic was permitted to 1.5.
Oh, that's why you're having a semicolon.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes.
I think absolutely. Town center, no changes to height. We want it to look the same, but cultural historic could change.
Center historic completely allocation. We excluded the town center historic completely. So what's the one? The cultural historic was permitted to 1.5. So what's the 1.5? That's why you're having a cultural historic.
That's interesting.
Yes, I think that's fine. That's why you're having a no changes to height. We want it to look the same. I think absolutely. Cultural historic. No changes to height. We want it to look the same.
We're having some technical difficulties if you're online. Just hold on with us. Worse than having a public meeting where it repeats itself.
I have a question.
Yes, hold a second. We're just trying to fix our microphones. Sorry, Melanie, hold just a second so we
I
can.
have a question.
Yeah. Can you hear
Has the
us?
meeting started?
Yes, the meeting has started, but we're having
The
some.
audio is very garbled.
Yes, the meeting started.
I understand.
We understand. We're having some technical problems here. Hold just a second.
Okay.
Yes, hold a second, we're just
Why
trying to.
don't you turn off our mics and-
Sorry. Hold just a second, so we can. Hold a second, we're just trying to fix our microphone, sorry. The meeting started. Yes, the meeting started, we're questioning, it's very quiet. The meeting started. Yes, the meeting started, but we're very quiet. We understand, we're having some technical problems
gotta laugh.
here. Yes, the meeting started. We understand, we're having some technical problems here. Just a second, microphone, sorry. Just a second. We're just trying to fix our microphone, sorry. Just a second.
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
How is this all plugged in?
That's just the public microphone.
Reboot. What is that? Has that been approved by the planning commission?
The
It
status,
has, right?
yes, for residential.
Yes.
Okay, for residential, lot coverage has been approved by the planning commission. The planning commission chose not to have a December meeting.
Right.
So I couldn't bring up the commercial one we'd approved. Okay, so, and there wasn't enough time to advertise for the mayor and city council to add that to the December 12th.
So the lot coverage will be in the January mayor and council meeting to
Yes.
schedule a public hearing.
Yes, and then just to finish that, then the commercial lot coverage will be at the planning commission's meeting in January, which I assume they're going to approve, given
Right, so it's all voluntary.
it's all voluntary. So then that would go to the mayor and city council to schedule a public hearing sometime in February or March.
Okay.
Okay, so by March, everything we have done in floodplain, lot coverage, and definition for pervious and impervious will have gone through the process. Okay, all right. We're back on. I apologize to any person who was in the public or any
Or
commission.
Melanie, is she on?
Melanie rejoined?
I don't know. I did send them a note that we were going to restart,
Okay,
and she's back.
and you're back.
Okay.
Melanie, I apologize. It was bad enough here. I don't know what it sounded like to you all and anyone else who's on. It was horrible. We just had a system breakdown. So Melanie, can you now hear us?
I can, you're crisp and clear.
Excellent, good. And hopefully you only hear me once. That was just a horrible process. Okay, so to go back through our opening attendances, Melanie by Zoom, Patrick is not on at this point. Okay, so, and again, we already had a quorum. So Melanie, thank you for living through all of that process. Okay, we're back on not approving the minutes from our last meeting, but actually discussing the motion, and I'm recommending that we clean it up for the records so that we say at this meeting, we actually looked at and listened to, which our secretary did, the last meeting, and we're going to restate our motion. Okay.
So from a procedural perspective, we have two different motions. The one that was made by Barbara Curtis, I will read it again. And I think procedurally, if we may accept this one, and then I don't know from a procedural, what you do with the other one that we're going to discard, which was made by you, Dennis. So Dennis, you made one motion, but it didn't capture everything. Barbara, you made the motion to, as an incentive to all commercial buildings to elevate for floodplain proofing purposes, if they raise their building 18 inches, they may raise the height by 2 feet, except for the town center historic.
And make a comment there, which has no height increase.
Oh, okay, perfect, which has no height increase, and the cultural historic, which is only permitted to raise at 1.5 feet. It was seconded by Melanie Moser.
I have some second thoughts about excluding the town center historic. What if we had a hurricane where downtown was flooded and the people wanted to rebuild and elevate? This would say they can't because they'd be height limited.
So right now in the historic district, depending on the existing buildings within 100 feet, you can actually go up to 36 feet in height. Because there's an established building height. I think most people know of the established building line. So depending on where your house is, you can have a lesser front yard setback. In the historic district, you can actually, if you can verify that within 100 feet, there's a building that's 34 feet tall, then you can go to 34 or even up to 36 feet in height. So just so you know that. So that's just informational. And I just took care of that
This
item
is
for you,
40.
Dennis.
Is it not?
This what, Bob? Say it again?
This is 40?
Give me just a minute.
Or if there were a significant fire and 2 or 3 buildings were burned out, you know, it would...
Yeah, so
yeah.
thank you, Bob. Town Center Historic and Town Center Historic are 40 feet in height.
Not advocating one way or another, I'm just saying I hadn't considered that before, and I want to make sure everyone else has considered it.
Right.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
It would go to 40 feet. It's permitted to go to 40, so
Yeah.
do we need to include that in what we're talking about, or just leave it stand?
Well, if it's existing, we're not making any change.
Yeah.
Correct.
Then we don't need to comment on it. Right. I'm not sure why we're,
I'd stay with the existing.
yeah. Okay, so just for clarification, how do we do this so it's clear? And I think it would be better if we just had one motion instead of 2 motions that people have to remember. So let's just take a crack at it before we actually have a motion, all right? So it seems to me we're recommending it's all voluntary in the commercial. That's our first point. And excluding town center historic and cultural historic, we're saying anyone who voluntarily raises their freeboard by 36 inches can take advantage of adding up to 2 additional feet in height. Then, to address specific town center historic and cultural historic, we're saying if you raise 18 inches, you would, your height would be at the current 40 feet.
Do we have to say that?
There'd be no, or we could say there'd be no change to your height.
Well, because cultural historic has a 34-foot height limit.
Oh, cultural historic has 34?
34.
Town center
That's
has
the-
40?
Yes. So let me double check. All of the commercial industrial zones, so our town center, marine commercial, general commercial, industrial, our community facilities, which are 3 different groups, all have a 40-foot maximum height. The cultural historic has a 34 maximum building height.
So why don't we just go to 30? Is it that critical? What's in cultural historic? I'd really like to
There's a
streamline this.
cemetery.
Right, there's a cemetery, so we're not talking about anything.
And the historical society's property,
And they're
their
not
campus.
going to. Okay. Unless they brought in a building, you know, they could bring in a lighthouse or a church.
Again, steeples don't count.
Steeples don't count.
Correct.
Right.
They're not going to do that.
I know they have plans to bring in buildings, but I don't think, based on their mission, that like you'd get a building that tall, because I don't think they built buildings that tall.
They do. There would be some. I mean, you could bring in a barn with a silo, but I don't think they're going to either. But, pardon me?
That doesn't count.
The barn would.
The barn would, but the silos.
The silo doesn't because it's like a steeple? Okay.
Well, Amy, you did also last meeting made a comment about Portsmouth. I think you were in Portsmouth, New Hampshire or somewhere, and you said a lot of those buildings were raised.
They were all raised because they're in a flood zone, but there weren't tall buildings in their historic community either.
And again, most of the town center is that's in the historic district is not in the floodplain. The majority of the.
Currently, not in the floodplain.
Currently.
Currently, yeah. Well, why don't we just exclude towns, why don't we just exclude town center historic?
Historic, yeah, right.
Why don't we keep cultural historic up, because we don't think they're going to do it anyway. Just keep them in the group and only make one exception. It's cleaner, I think. If we said, okay, if you guys want to raise your properties, you want to take advantage either of whatever flood management you want to use, and you're going to do a freeboard 36 inches or whatever your process is, we're going to let you up to the 36 additional 2 feet in height, except for town center historic. We're not going to give them any other height increase. I don't feel strongly about this. I mean,
I don't either.
yeah. What I really want is, I want to just make it so it doesn't have so many layers to it.
Janelle, what do you think?
So I'm just going to throw out another little one. The limited commercial district has a maximum height of 30 and a half feet and then 34 feet, 34 feet if you're in the floodplain. So you have two odd.
We have two odd. Go
Two
through them again.
odd.
Cultural historic.
Cultural historic, and then the limited commercial historic. Cultural historic, 34, limited commercial, 30 and a half. If not in the floodplain, it's 34 feet. And then all the others are at 40 feet.
I'm pausing now. Is height critical? In other words, we had the conversation about voluntary because these businesses are different than residential. They have different access to insurance. They might have a basement that is, inventory. They're just such different animals. So that's why we got to voluntary. But if somebody wanted to raise their height because of the nature of their business, and they were trying to do the right thing to get themselves protected, why wouldn't we let everybody go up to 36 feet except for town center historic? What would be the negative of that happening? Everybody to go up, that they have the freedom
To go up an additional 36 inches?
Yes.
Okay.
But we're saying
No,
2
I'm
feet.
saying 2 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, because you said
So I
36.
did, because I looked down at my notice
That's
for
why I
freeboard.
asked, because I was
No.
like,
What I'm
I
saying
wanted to
is,
make sure.
why don't we allow them to do whatever they think makes sense to their business? And if they do that, they would have the carrot of raising their height by 2 feet from the current, whatever the current is, except for cultural, town center historic. That's one way. Another way is just say to everybody, voluntary, if you do it, you can go up 2 more feet.
It's cleaner,
It's
easier.
cleaner.
It is.
Yeah.
It's much cleaner and much
Yeah.
easier to implement. And I'd rather we
Yeah.
go there because, as Brent has been saying, these folks are going to make decisions. They're making business decisions. They're not making, I'm going to live here and my grandchildren are going to get this property decision. Yeah. So let's just be cleaner. Let's just say,
Yeah.
we're giving a carrot to everybody if you try to do the right thing.
I'll also throw out there, just having been around development for nearly 30 years, you're going to be hard pressed to find an architect that's going to buck the system. So if in like the town center.
Yeah, they're not going to want a building
area,
to look weird
They're
above.
not going to, everybody else is at grade and they're not going to put 4 steps
Yeah,
going up in.
exactly.
They're not going to be the oddball. Any architect worth their salt is going to fight that tooth and nail.
Right.
And dry flood-proof that place.
Right.
If needed.
They're
In the historic district.
Yes,
Right.
they're incentive in it. Okay, so,
They're not going to go against character.
Yeah, scaling
Oh,
and
and they're
massing.
not for accessibility reasons, too.
Correct.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That's a foot traffic area. They want people in and out.
right. And our whole mission is really encouraging right behavior and giving some freedom to adjust from what you're currently in. So can someone make that motion, the voluntary?
So that sounds like it was Dennis's original motion, right?
Yes, we
Yes.
just didn't have the exclusions in Dennis's.
But it-
So we're doing away with the exclusions, so,
Correct. It's Dennis's original motion. I think we should just repeat it.
yes.
Would you like it repeated? Do you have a copy of your motion?
No, I don't.
Here you go.
Is it 18 inches or
You guys have the
36
advantage
inches?
over us.
It's 2 feet. They can go up above 2 feet of their existing.
Raising 36 inches.
Freeboard
Thank
to
you.
freeboard.
That's what, because I originally had it as 18 inches
Yes.
as freeboard was what I had
Yes.
heard. So I just wanted to make sure I'm good.
I heard the same thing. That's in my notes as well.
Based on today, yes, it's 36. I'm gonna.
36 and 2. Go ahead, Brent, before Dennis reads that motion.
So you're talking about 36 inches of freeboard outside the,
Yes.
but only 18 in the 500?
We're not making, we didn't make that change. I mean, that's interesting. You mean in the no flood zone regulated, the third option, where we right now have it for residential at 18?
Right.
Totally voluntary. So Brent's point.
Curious why you would go to 36 for commercial.
Why would we make commercial do more than what we're asking residential?
My understanding was it was 18 inches with 2 feet.
No,
Unless I missed that from
No,
last meeting.
commercial right now at, not in the 1% or the 0.2, what does it have? Anything?
Whatever building
If
code
it's
is.
Whatever the building code is. So they don't, right now, so there's a site plan going through, and they're either flood-proofing it, or they're raising it 18 inches based on the city code, but they're not getting any additional building height out of it.
At the city code right now, outside the 1% and the,
Yeah,
is 18? In the non-regulated floodplains?
There is none.
There is none, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, that, I may not have asked it that clearly. So in residential, what Brent's saying is, we applied that, saying, hey, do the right thing, we're going to allow you to do it now. Shouldn't we also do that for commercial and give that at 18 rather than 36? Why are we giving them a carrot with more work than we're giving residential? That's really the question.
Well, if you gave them 36 inches, then 24 inches of height raising is a disincentive.
Right.
If you give them 18 inches voluntary.
So let's change the
Yeah.
motion to 18 for all,
Yeah.
okay? Because we're saying commercial is more interested to protect and has resources to do it. So if they go up and they do we have to say freeboard and/or floodproofing? Do we have to, or does, how do we,
Building code takes care of that.
building code takes care of it?
Building code will
Okay.
take care of that,
Okay,
if that helps.
That does help.
Okay.
So the question is, do we want them to go up higher, not higher, on their flood protection? Do we want them to go to 18 or 36? One could say this, for any commercial building, on any of the commercial zone, if they're in the 1%, if they're in either of the regulated floodplains, we would say you can, if you do 36, we're going to give you 2 feet. If you're not, I mean, that would be one option. If you're not in any of the regulated floodplain and you're at 0 requirement, we're going to give you an incentive that if you go up at least 18, we'll give you 36. Barbara's going to give you 2 feet. Barbara's going to shake her head because she's saying if we're giving them 36, why aren't we giving them more height?
Right, at least 36.
What is it? Is it 0 now? There's no 18-inch freeboard even in the floodplain for commercial?
So there is in the floodplain, there's just no extra building height right now in the
That's why
floodplain.
it's only 2 feet, because you're only raising it 18 inches to get to 36. I don't know why we're doing 2 feet and not doing 18 inches of additional building height, but 2 feet's fine if you guys want to do it.
Well, so my understanding from the last meeting is the motion was 18 inches freeboard, and then you can have an extra 2 feet of building height.
Right, that was my understanding as well, because
And that works-
the carrot was
Mine too.
bigger than
And that
the-
works in the 1%.
Stick.
Now tell me about the 500-year floodplain. What's on the books right now?
There's nothing on the books right now.
Nothing on the books for the 500, and there's nothing on the books for the non-regulated.
Correct. So
Okay.
my understanding is based on what you guys were, is anybody, anywhere who wants the extra 2 feet is going up 18 inches from freeboard.
Okay. So for 500, it'd go from 0 to 18, for the non-regulated 0 to 18, but you're saying in the 1%, it's already 18. Don't we want to increase that? I mean, that would be more consistent with what we're doing with residential. We're saying you currently have to do 18 for freeboard by building code. Do we want to raise that for the commercial in the 1%? And we'd have to raise the height more than 2 feet. Think the beach hotel.
So
Well, I was thinking Dairy Queen.
Dairy Queen, right.
So if you make Dairy Queen go up 36 inches, because I think that's what everybody was talking about last time was Dairy Queen. If we tell Dairy Queen go up 18 inches, what does it look like? If we tell Dairy Queen to go up 36 inches, what does that look like?
Looks like it's hard for customers to get to Dairy Queen.
So they still have the option of floodproofing
Yes.
below
Correct.
that freeboard. The incentive was in the 1% to go from 18 to 36 and give them that additional height, but outside, it was only 18 inches.
And what would be the height recommendation for the
I
outside?
thought we were going up 2.
2 feet?
So the carrot was greater than the stick.
Yes, for the other 2, yes, but if we're going to go up
So you
to,
went up, the finished floor went up 18, but the height went up 2.
Right, but if your floor is going up 36,
That's
How
what I'm
much do
saying
you
is,
give
I
them?
didn't think we were talking about going up 36,
Only in the one.
only in the 1%.
Right.
and what would be the height increase? I think
In
that's
the
Barbara's point is,
1%.
if we take the 1% that's regulated right now at 18 inches of some flood proofing, and they have no height increase,
They went up additional 18, then they went up an additional 18. It was a 1-for-1 in the floodplain.
In residential.
In
Well, I think
residential.
in the commercial as well. I thought that's what,
Okay, it's 2 feet on.
or across the board, whatever the finished floor requirement was,
I don't
went
think
up
we ever
18
got there.
inches.
I think we didn't get there. I
Yeah,
think
we
that's
didn't
why
get
we're,
there.
yeah,
2
let's
feet in
start,
height.
let's start a little bit clean, I think, because it's hard to go back
Yeah.
in. So, the only thing we got to was it's voluntary. Yeah, sorry, it's of no use, I know exactly, our minutes don't work.
You were saying?
Dennis, could you clarify? All right, so in the 1%, let's just take with that, commercial 1%, currently on the books, is that they have to flood-proof or have a freeboard of 18 inches, and there's no height increase, that's current. How should we
Right.
handle the 1%? Do we want them to go up higher? Or do we want to impose a higher freeboard or flood-proofing on the 1%?
my notes say that all voluntary, if someone adds an extra 18 inches freeboard, they get an extra 24 inches in height. And I think that could apply across all the commercial industrial areas, because if they're already at 18 inches,
Okay,
you're giving them, they would take an extra 18 and you're giving them 24 inches.
right. Because it's voluntary, where the
Yeah.
trigger isn't starting the process, only if they avail themselves. I mean, I think that's the different in our heads
Yeah.
to think through.
That was my
Well-
understanding across the board.
Because right now, for in the commercial industrial, and I'm just going to call it, what is it? Attachment 4, which is the table for the non-residential, and then limited commercials attached to one of the residential ones. If you're FEMA flood zone, AE and VE, it's 40 feet. And if you're outside the flood zone, you're still at, your max is at 40 feet. So what I'm hearing is you want that one to go to 42 across the board, or up 2 feet.
Up 2 feet, let's do it that
Because
way, because they have too many denominator variances.
Variables. And then if you add an additional, so that you would just get that right off the board. That's not voluntary, that you're just changing code, saying, okay, you do 18 inches, you get an extra 2 feet of building height, because that's how it reads now. And then if you do an additional 18, which gets you to 36, what height do you want? Or have I lost?
No, you haven't lost me. The
You
problem-
totally lost me.
Well, the denominator changes every time. I don't think we should regulate by zone. I think we should say feet above. Or just a blanket. What's the tallest building in Lewis? This is like the Washington
hospital.
Monument. The hospital. And do you know what that ceiling is?
Actually, I think
42.
It's 42.
probably, I think the middle school might be taller than that.
It looks taller.
I think that one's around 50. And there's an exemption. If you set back something, you get to go up farther. So I think they're around 50. So those are your tallest buildings.
But what, do we have in the 1% commercial buildings that are not doing freeboard or floodproofing?
Maximum height for, doesn't matter where you are, it's 40 feet across the board. Is
No,
that what you're
that's not
asking?
What I'm asking
Okay,
is,
sorry.
are we really talking about an incentive for commercial buildings in the 1% floodplain? Like, does anybody not do floodproofing or doesn't do a freeboard?
No, because they have to.
Because they have to. So so they have to, so they don't need a carrot because they have to do it anyway.
Yeah, and usually if the higher up you go, the more ADA accessible issues you run into.
Sure, exactly. But a brand-new building, let's think of it this way. If Dairy Queen burned, a horrible thought before Christmas, if Dairy Queen burned and they wanted to rebuild, we want them to go up 18 inches, and we want to give them 2 feet additional in height of the current.
They're still going to just floodproof.
Yeah,
They're still going to just floodproof, right?
so they won't get any building height.
They won't get any building height increase because they're
just
floodproofing.
floodproofing it.
God, we're making a mountain out of a molehill here. You know, we really are.
I think maybe you're talking for no change.
Yes, it's kind of, we're getting,
I don't know if the carrot's ever going to be
What
the carrot doesn't seem like
Enough.
it's enough for.
yummy enough to.
Right.
What does,
To take it.
what does floodproofing involve? I mean, if you're going to floodproof Dairy Queen to rebuild it.
So it means that your finished floor has to be above the base flood elevation, at or above. And it means that for whatever requirement is there, that you're keeping the floodwaters out. So it's either a solid tide door that gets put on it, a solid surface, typically it's slab on grade as well, so there's no crawl space for water to get underneath or upheaval or anything like that. So the water just goes around the building.
Or it's vented so they can,
No,
No.
that's
No.
that they can't do.
That's strictly
That-
residential.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Smart vents, the flood vents are for residential.
Yeah, you're slab on grade at that point, think your little strip malls along
Yep.
Route 1 are all slab on grade. That's dry floodproofing, so water can't get under, and all the services are above.
And someone chooses freeboard over floodproofing, why? For commercial?
Potentially insurance, potentially because they don't have customers. If you're in a manufacturing setting or something like that you don't have public in and out,
You don't have to deal with ADA.
that way you don't have to deal with ADA. If you're, I'll just pick one, a seamstress shop, that it's just production or whatever, and it's just employees, you can raise it at that point and make life simple for yourself and potentially have insurance be less. But if you're running a dry cleaner where people are dropping off and picking up,
Yep.
you're not going to elevate.
You're not going to elevate, so height is not a carrot
No.
at all.
And even at Dairy Queen, like going up in height, they're a one-story.
Yeah.
Even if you build a two-story Burger King like is at Ocean City, they still have plenty of height to build that two-story Burger King without having additional height offered to them.
What are other communities doing, do we know, in terms of commercial?
Commercial is just its own animal. You just kind of.
Struggling like we are.
True. And at the end of the day, as long as people can live in their home, then the commercial will find a way. It's after a hurricane, after a nor'easter, after a disaster, that commercial doesn't have to be open.
Right.
People have to have a domicile to feel
No,
safe.
Yes, I mean, I understand that we took the serious ones first.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I'm starting to get to, I don't even know why we're touching commercial. I mean, I'm starting to get to, I'm not sure we're providing any benefit to anybody. I just want to think through.
I don't know if it offers up.
Yeah,
So, I mean, if you look at a retrofit around here that kind of fits this is east of Maui, but it was an old house. So when you walk in there, you still got to walk up a flight of stairs to go shop.
correct.
The whole downstairs they've dry flood proofed it and made it what it is down there, but it's all storage, boardroom, so it's all surfboards and everything and whatnot, but all your shopping is upstairs. That's not ideal for public. Now, I mean, mostly everybody who wants a surfboard can walk up those steps.
Right, right. I mean,
You
I
know,
guess,
but-
I guess what I think about is,
Hit lightly.
But if he were to rebuild that, he could,
It looks completely different. It's slab on grade. It's, yeah.
and a commercial building, let's say a hotel that had to be rebuilt due to a storm, I guess what I'm hearing is currently, we're not putting enough carrot to make a difference anyway. They're going to do what's right for their business. But if something took their building down, if we think that way, so a hotel might say, it's worth investing in an elevator if I can do a rooftop restaurant with a view. I mean, then all of a sudden, height does matter. Yeah.
That's possible, yeah. But I'm also not sure that juice is worth that squeeze to lift the first floor for every single person walking through there without attempting the special exception route
Yeah.
first. It may be easier to poke that bear than to raise it that 18 inches and put the ramps in and do all of that work.
Well, okay, another way to look at this is hold on the 1%, which has some kind of requirement now, and using the same methodology that we said the floodplains are moving, we should address the 500-year floodplain and the non-regulated. Because if the floodplain's moving, yes, they could be in the 1%, but we want them, if they're building new commercial or renovating, to already take into account. So at a minimum, there should be a freeboard requirement, I think, for all. It's voluntary, again, but we should be on the books to say we highly recommend. That's what voluntary really is.
So to that, to make it equitable, you would have to almost give 2 feet to everybody, because you're punishing the people for being in the 1% without giving them any height.
Right. Oh, no, I'm,
So 2 feet to everybody.
yes, which
18
doesn't
inches
sound like
voluntary.
doesn't sound like a giant carrot, but it's something.
It's something.
It's all voluntary,
It's
so.
equitable.
Yeah, it is equitable. I would just stay with the 18 for all three and 2 feet.
Yeah, I agree.
Say for all three.
Meaning the 1%, the 100-year floodplain, the 1%,
I get that.
the 500,
But
and
I
the
mean,
non-regulated.
Already, in the floodplains, they have 18 inches,
They do,
right?
but they have no carrot at all. This is barely a
Right,
carrot, but at least.
So what are we saying?
What we're saying is, if you have a commercial property, let's just take that town center historic out of it. If you have a commercial property in Lewis, no matter its location,
If it's in the floodplain, now let's talk about in the floodplain.
okay, so talk about in the floodplain, right now you currently have to have some kind of flood protection
Or 18 inches.
or
of
18-inch
free-
freeboard.
Right.
That's the current.
So what are we saying?
We're saying that you could go up 2 feet.
Voluntarily, if you take it up to 36, you'll get 2 feet on the height.
No, I'm saying keep it at 18. Why not just keep everybody at 18?
Well, the voluntary would be 18.
It's all voluntary.
They're already required to have
Already,
the
yeah.
18.
Well, okay.
I
So
think that's
what
the-
you're saying.
That's where I'm a
the
little
semantics
confused, what you're
problem.
saying here.
Yeah.
So if you're in the 1%,
You're
you
not,
already have.
there's not
the-
a voluntary, you
Right,
have
but
to, you have to do 18.
So if you
like
go
the
with the,
beach
Yeah.
if you go to the
Yeah.
.2, if the 500-year floodplain, and you're outside of it altogether, if you go 18, you get 2 feet.
Correct.
Is that what we're
Yes.
trying to, that's
Yes.
where we're kind of settling on?
That's what we're settling on, we're just saying that's where I'm settling, because that's where I'm settling, because I'm saying, if you go up 18 inches now in freeboard, which you're required to in the 1%, we give you no additional height. The city of Lewis doesn't give you anything.
I got that.
Okay, so if it's not voluntary in the 1%, you have to. If you had to rebuild, renovation, you have to have 18 inches of freeboard. So let's give them a little bit of carrot for thanking them for doing the right thing. That's one option. Or we could say, if you're building new in the 1%, go up 36, but it seems extraordinary because of the clientele that would have to deal with them.
Talking voluntary anyway.
Well, we're talking voluntary, except in the 1%, you must, to meet code, do 18.
Right.
So I'm saying, if you want to, if if you want to rebuild in the 1% commercial, Lewis requires you to have 18-inch freeboard currently. We're going to say, we still require you to have 18-inch, but we're going to give you a little carrot, a nicety, not enough that motivates. Because we're not trying, because Brent's point is, we shouldn't punish the people
Yeah.
in the 1%. We might give everybody else 2 feet, well, then we'd have to give the people who have to do the 18-inch 2 feet.
So what I hear, what I understand, all right, and then God knows what that is, but if you're in the 1%, currently you have to have 18 inches. So what we're saying is in the 1%, if you new construction or you have to rebuild, you still have the requirement of 18 inches, but we're going to give you an additional 2 feet in height if you want it.
Correct, and we should not use the word voluntary in the 1%. I think that's what's tripping all us up, because it's not voluntary right now. Right. Okay? So what we're saying.
Separate motions.
It has to be 2 separate motions,
Right.
because it's too confusing.
Yeah, the 1%.
1% is 18 inches minimum. We could say you must flood-proof freeboard to a minimum of 18 inches, and there can be an allowance to go up 2 feet in height. Then the second motion is, for all other commercial buildings, there are actually 3 motions because town center's excluded, unless we want to put in the second motion. For all others in the 500 or the unregulated, we are voluntarily saying you should use 18 inches. And if you choose and elect to do that, we'll allow you to go up 2 feet. Okay. And then for town center historic, you're out of luck, basically.
Stays the same.
It stays the same. Or we could say you need to do the 18-inch.
The second motion, just say exclusive of.
Exclusive of. But town center historic does not have an 18-inch freeboard because some of it's in the 1% floodplain in
Not the
Second
historic
Street?
district. The other side of
The other side
Palatine,
of
which is
Palatine.
town center,
Yes.
yes. If you go.
Okay, so town
Second
center
Street-
historic, which we're worried about we're worried about Second Street.
Second Street is not in the floodplain.
Correct. So they'd be in our other options. Okay. All right. So,
And I put it on the screen that you can see what the floodplain is, what the height requirement for in the floodplain, and then you have to actually go down to the next page where it says all other locations. So right now they're all the same.
but is the 2 feet incentive above the current? Because they're all different denominators.
Current's 40 feet.
Current is 40 feet.
But some of them are.
Flood-proofed or freeboard.
But you said that like the middle school, is it like
There's
50 feet?
There's an exception that allows you to, if you set back a portion of the building, then that can go up higher.
Starting to feel like we should leave it alone.
Like it is, because it's 40 feet now.
Yeah.
They can always raise it.
So right now, cultural historic is 30 and a half feet. If you're in the floodplain, you get 34 feet. So that is a jump. And then I believe limited commercial is 30 and a half feet. If you're in the historic, you go to 34 feet. All of the other normal commercials that we've talked about, town center, marine commercial, general commercial, industrial, all the community facilities, they're all at 40 feet, whether or not you're in the floodplain. In the floodplain, again, you either have to elevate it 18 inches, but you're still stuck at 40 feet, or you're flood proofing it with a 40-foot.
So many denominators, I feel like we're, right.
What if you just said the only outlier is cultural historic, which I understand to be the stuff on the other side of Pilottown Road?
Right, it's the cemetery, there's a church with the cemetery.
Is the inn on Canal Square in that?
No, and then.
No, that's town center,
You
not
said cultural
historic.
historic. Cultural historic is the cemetery with the church and then the Lewis Historical Society's property. It's the only 2 properties zoned cultural historic.
They're not likely to use it.
I mean, they're not in the floodplain at this time. If they're proposing a new building, I don't see, a building of that age being over 40 feet in height based on what was in Lewis. But that's up to, again, they're already going from 30 and a half to 34 feet if it ends up in the floodplain.
What's 4 feet? A room for children. I mean, like, we're not doing anything here on the carrot side. So as a city planner, you're not a recommendation, but is this a difficult code to implement because everybody's got a different requirement, or you feel like it's reflective of the purpose of that zone?
From a planner, I understand code, so I can understand it. It's, does the public understand it, and is it helpful for the public, is always.
Why don't we just address the 1%? Why don't we not address the others?
So to that point as
Yeah.
well, if you're looking to develop something, you're looking at one
Yes, you're not.
zone.
Okay, correct.
You're not
right.
looking across the board.
So you don't have to be as
So-
smart as we're all trying to be.
So you just,
Right.
you have the tunnel vision of, I'm in the MC zone.
Yes,
Yeah, Dairy Queen's coming in, I'm looking at Dairy Queen.
right.
You know, if I'm, the cemetery comes in, then the cemetery's coming in.
Yeah. It's whatever,
It's
adjacent,
a parcel
so be it.
specific.
You know, if I'm looking for a specific thing, I'm talking to a real estate agent, and they're going to find me
Right.
something that fits.
Right.
But also, at the end of the day, the insurance is going to tell me what I need to do and what I need to build and what's going to make sense and what can be insured. So,
Would we have a public, the only pushback maybe is if we have a commercial owner who's in the floodplain, has looked at what we've done for residential and says, hey, how come you didn't give me any more room on height? Because you're allowing property owner Joe to have a carrot. Why are you treating business separately from?
most of the only reason to have height is a hotel or an assembly hall. If I've got a store, there's no reason for a third floor.
Right.
Or a parking lot.
Right.
Yeah, because then the higher square footage, the more parking you have to provide, and
And
because that goes together.
What
freaking
happens with?
garage is ever going to get
Well, what happens with
approved.
townhouses that, let's use the property near Dairy Queen where all those food trucks were. So that property, I've heard, was commercial, then the owner wanted to be residential, then went back commercial, going back and forth and back and forth. But if that owner, whoever owns that property, wanted to put in townhouses with a commercial application, Main Street USA is a good movement. Could they put in commercial on the first floor and then have residential on second and third?
Yes.
They can, because that's a hybrid zone, right?
Yes.
So that falls into a PUD, which none of this applies.
Why does a PUD
Right.
not?
No,
Or no, you're
mixed
not-
use is a
Mixed
permitted
use.
use.
Okay.
Mixed use is
Mixed use is
permitted.
permitted. In the general commercial zone, you're not allowed to have residential on the first floor, but you can have residential above the first floor.
Which, I mean, I'm not saying that beachfront is affordable housing, but one of the challenges of Lewis is looking for more rental units. And so in a lot of other cities, they're looking at mixed use as the way to address that. They're saying, put in a moneymaker on the first floor for the property owner and put in apartments upstairs, which can address some of the workforce,
We already have that, that's safe harbor.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and
So,
also right across from the Buttery, or
right.
the new name.
So would you want to give that property owner the ability to raise their height so they could actually do more of that? That's where I'm going. I was tying it to height.
Right.
I really
'Cause
was.
they're still limited to 3 stories.
So could they ask for a special exception?
So it would be a variance
Or a
through the board.
variance.
I just want to make sure, because
Right, sorry.
there are different
That would
things.
not go to the
That-
planning
that's the
commission.
issue.
That
would
goes to the Board of
board.
Adjustment, because they'd be seeking relief from the zoning code.
Right.
Because right now in general commercial, you're only allowed 2 stories at a 40-foot height, but if you're in the floodplain, I said 40-foot height, yep. In the floodplain, you can actually have 3 stories with a 40-foot height.
Okay.
So there's,
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything rational to do here, and I'm struggling. I think we're all struggling. Like, leave it alone is one option. Just leave it alone because it doesn't really, nothing we're doing seems to have really an impact
I-
on commercial.
I don't know if it changes a whole lot of their approach and how things are constructed.
I wish we could say something like this, so put me in the planning language world. We highly recommend floodproofing freeboard. And in doing that, we think you should have an opportunity to raise the height, depending on your application. But that doesn't mean anything, right, for code?
Oh, and it's a can of worms
It's a can of worms.
when somebody gets a hold of it
Yeah,
and decides.
there's no clarity.
Yeah, because you could
that
have unintended
60 stories is fine.
Yeah, right,
unintended consequences.
right. Do you want to have a commercial property flooded? And what's the impact? Their insurance will cover it. What's the impact on, yeah, they're going to take care of it themselves.
What's the, where the food trucks are, for its property? What's that zone right?
General commercial. It is commercial.
Carriage house?
It's a mixed-use development with paid parking lot on the first floor, and then there are apartments or units on the second and third floor.
So it's a parking lot.
Yeah.
And a commercial parking lot
get
is a
flooded, too.
permitted use.
And it will be flooded, and it does flood.
Oh, yeah, it floods from nor'easters. It's not, that's all it could.
But what's the height of something like that?
40 feet. They are maxing out their site at 40 feet because that's the maximum building height.
So if he
With
wanted to,
elevators and stuff up.
Again, those are allowed to encroach, and if he wants to do like a patio or a balcony on the top floor, that is also allowed.
So 40 feet is a 3-story building?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I say we leave this alone. I don't think we're doing anything.
No, yeah, it's going to cause more confusion than it's going to help.
We're confused.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been at this.
Anybody else
a
takes a
while.
look at it is going to be even more
Exactly.
confused.
40 to 10
I'm
hours
with
on the
you.
clock
Yeah.
I think we leave it alone.
I say too.
I would recommend a motion
to
to-
vacate or stuff.
correct, just to leave it
Yeah.
as is, vacating the previous motions at the previous meeting.
Okay,
Yes.
Because that way,
yes,
yes,
we're having
So-
no impact. We're really having no
Amy,
impact at all.
Can I see that?
Yes.
No,
Can you see your old motion?
The one that, yeah, that one you got your hand on.
Yep.
Okay.
Before I vote for that, can you tell me the implication for someone who is hoping for more height, but really, we aren't offering it anyway, right? Even if we did say 2 feet, there's a limit already in terms of heights. What I'm looking at, is there a citizen, is there a commercial property owner that's going to come forward and say, why didn't you address it? I want to do the right thing, and I want to go above the current height restriction of the city.
Was going to be voluntary anyway, wasn't it?
correct.
So, and if we don't have it, can't they go and petition in the Board of Adjustments?
They can.
They can. There's always relief from anything in the zoning code to the Board of Adjustment. They just have to meet the criteria as to
So it's
why
not voluntary
needed.
if you're in the 1%.
if
You have to do
it's-
freeboard. It's not voluntary.
If it's.
Or floodproofing.
Or floodproofing.
You know, if it's a commercial thing, isn't it going to come through the planning commission on a request for waiver or
No,
variance?
doesn't
no,
come to us.
because Planning Commission has the authority to waive Chapter 170, the subdivision land development code. If it's, say, a building height or a setback, that falls to the Board of Adjustment that they have to meet, and we typically would make them go to the Board of Adjustment first before it gets to Planning Commission, because that way then the Planning Commission would not be viewing something that does not comply with code.
Right.
And they wouldn't be bringing something that
Okay.
isn't approvable.
Correct.
And I think we should vacate the motion, but I think what we're really saying is what exists on the books and the nature of these properties and the developers. There's not enough of an, I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm pausing. I'm pausing because I feel like just because it's hard, we're not addressing it, or are we not addressing it because, in fact, it doesn't really have an impact?
I don't think it has an impact.
You don't think it has an impact?
Doesn't have the impact.
It doesn't have the impact. I hate to leave another body to have to do our work, but if it doesn't really have an impact, then the body who's used to doing that looks at it and there may be a unique situation.
Again, I think if something comes up and there's the outreach for the Board of Adjustment, but again, you have to meet multiple criteria, because it's quasi judicial that the Board of Adjustment, they're acting, because any appeal goes to the state judiciary to
So if it makes you feel any better,
I'd like to feel better.
at the end of the day, all they'd really be realizing is 6 inches.
Yeah.
So you're going up
Yeah.
18, you're going up 24. They're only going to, I mean, height is a quasi thing. It's all relative.
Doesn't get you an extra story.
No.
Or
It-
it gets you
it-
6 more inches of
Right.
headroom in somewhere.
Yeah, you'd have to
That's
go
it.
up a lot more to make it impactful.
Right. I mean, if you went up 6 feet, they might be able to get 8 out of it and get a fourth, but by code, they can only go 3. So
You know what I would,
you're limited at 3
Yeah.
stories.
right,
Doesn't it get the finished floor elevation up 18 inches?
It does, but that insurance is going to cover commercial. And like I said, in a disaster, I'm not trying to downplay anything, but the toy shop doesn't need to be open when you're trying to recover and FEMA's present.
well, unless that's your total income, and you're the property
But you
owner.
have insurance for that.
Right.
You need a place to lay your head at night.
So let me try one more time, not an emotion, let me just, so I can feel better. If we, not I feel better, but I just want commercial property owners to have an incentive to do the right thing, whether they have insurance or not. I want the city of Lewis to start protecting all of its property. That's my desire. So for commercial, if they invested more, and it's voluntary anyway, I would still like to give them height increases, should they choose to take advantage of them. And maybe no one takes advantage of them, but at least they don't have to go into another Board of Appeals, because in fact, we've said, if you want to invest your money and you want to go up higher, then voluntarily. So in other words, the 1% is 18 inches right now. If they voluntarily go up to 36, voluntarily, and the nature of their business, and they can afford elevators or whatever else, why wouldn't we give them more height? Why wouldn't we say, wow, you're really protecting your property, and so we don't want our code to restrict your vision of your commercial property?
I think if we do that, it's not going to hurt anything. It may save people some money for the application fees for Board of Adjustment. But I think if we do it, we should do it across the board for commercial and not even have the town center historic as an exception. Just make it clean.
What's a typical floor height?
10 feet.
10 feet.
Yeah.
I don't know, in a commercial property, in residential, it's 8 to 10 feet.
You might be 10 to 12 on first,
Okay.
on commercial, just because of
So what if we said it could go up
mechanical runs and like.
an additional floor in whatever zoning you're in? So an additional floor, which would be 10 feet. I asked you that
Then
question, you
gotta-
answered me.
You got to define floor.
So then
Yeah.
you're changing the zoning
better
code
to
because you're
do
only
feet.
allowed, you're,
Right,
Better to
you'd
do
be.
in the commercial,
you'd
you
be
only allow.
Changing the number of stories.
Right.
And the building height.
Which
I
is,
think you're just talking
And what's the purpose of that?
floor up.
I'm talking about finished floor
No,
up,
but just
right?
not even worrying about giving them an extra level
Story.
at the
Okay.
top. Just
Okay.
get the finished floor up and just raise the height accordingly.
Aren't we really just trying to protect from flooding instead of floors and things like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we're
Yes,
trying to protect from flooding, what they do with that space is up to them, as far as I'm concerned. And that may be one of the things that's clouding this up. But I could certainly live with if a motion that said if you're in the 1%, all commercial property, if you're in the 1% and you go an additional 18 inches, you get 2 feet of additional height. If you're in the 500-year or outside of that, if you raise your building 18 inches, you get 2 feet of height. And let them
And let
figure
them
out how to
decide.
do it.
I feel like then we're at least saying something. That's where I am.
I can live with that. I mean, the incentive is to protect your building from flooding.
Correct.
And it's voluntary anyway.
it's
If you
voluntary,
don't want to do
right.
it, then that's fine.
Right.
But if you do want to do it, you've got that opportunity.
What do the rest of you think about that? We're proposing something that may or may not have any impact,
So,
but it is clarifying.
right. I thought that's where we were last time. Is
Yeah.
18 inches additional freeboard and 2 feet additional height.
Yes, but you were convincing that in the current 1%, it's so little for
Right.
what their heights are. But let's go back to that. It's at least a statement to say, and maybe it has to have a preface, not in our recommendation, but in our communication to the Planning Commission and Mayor and City Council is, this is a different beast, this is a different animal, they're motivated differently, they have different insurance, but we still are after the mission of protecting properties, be it residential or commercial. So for the very first time, we're going to be proposing it's again voluntary for the 500 and outside the 500. Voluntarily, we think you should have an 18-inch freeboard if you choose that flood-proofing style. And if you do that, we're going to give you a height increase of 2 feet. But again, it's not a height increase of 2 feet over base. Or is it? It's all, yes, because it's all 40,
All 40, so
except
everybody,
for the cemetery.
yeah, everything would go from 40 to 42, and then 34 to 36.
Okay, so
And then 34 to 30, 34 to 36.
Okay, and then we don't have to, as Dennis said, we don't have to exclude town center historic. Everybody is going to be saying, hey, folks, if you're in the 1% and you have to do it, we're going to give you the additional 2 feet. It's minimal, you may not take advantage of it. For the others, it's voluntary, but if you elect to do it, we'll give you a height increase.
Aren't they both voluntary?
The other two are, just the 1% is not.
Isn't it 1%?
No, because it's required by code. You have to have 18-inch of freeboard.
So
Or dry flood.
Or dry, or another flood proofing. So it's not really, 1% is really not voluntary. On the
Yeah.
books right now, they have to do it.
So
Yeah, they just
That's why I
get
think
40
it
feet.
should be 2 motions. Let's do the 1% one first.
All right,
Joellen, are you
you get
ready?
rid of the 2 motions.
Let's vacate, let's
Yeah.
make a motion to vacate the prior meeting's motions.
Okay.
Well, we did 3. And the first one was really to correct
The minutes,
the minutes, so,
that one stays.
but then under motions, the second and third bullet would be,
So we need a motion to vacate the second and third bullets of the prior environmental subcommittee meeting
Regarding building height.
what was,
regarding building
I
height.
move that we,
what was the date of that meeting? Let's get it clear.
November 30?
20th.
No?
November
20th? November 20?
Okay.
November 20.
Okay, go ahead.
okay, I move that we vacate the 2 motions on
second and third.
Say
the
second, third.
second and third motion on commercial building height in the floodplain and elsewhere. What did I say? I move that we vacate them,
Vacate the motion.
vacate the motions in the draft
Start with the date
minutes.
of the meeting, because that way it's very clear. It was the 11th.
Okay, the November
November
20th.
20th?
It's the
was it?
20th.
It's the 20th.
November
It's the
20th. Okay.
Start again. Do the
Yes.
date and then say which bullets.
From the minutes of the November 20th Environmental Subcommittee, there were 3 motions made. The second and third motion dealt with floodproofing and incentives for floodproofing. I move that we vacate both of those motions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
And Dennis, you second?
Dennis,
Yeah,
second?
second.
No further,
Is Melanie there?
Melanie has been there.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, sorry, Melanie. Whew. Okay, no further discussion, I hear. Is Patrick on? No? Okay, so I'll call for a vote on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And Patrick not in attendance. Okay. Now I'd like to entertain a new motion for commercial properties that are in the 1% that have a current requirement of an 18-inch freeboard or floodproofing approach. A motion on how we should address the 1%, the commercial properties in the 1%.
I'll take a shot at it.
Okay?
Somebody help me here. I would make a motion that in all commercial property in the 1% floodplain, they currently have to have 18 inches of freeboard. And if they do that, then we want to allow them to have the opportunity to have a height limit raised by 2 feet. Does that make sense?
Second.
Freeboard or floodproofing, or just
Both.
both? Okay.
Freeboard or floodproofing.
Floodproofing, and then,
Yeah.
Yes.
so, okay, I'm with you.
Now, you want to say that, try again? I don't know.
No, so what you're doing now is anything, any commercial
Any commercial.
or industrial, as we've identified in the two
Commercial or
tables,
industrial,
that are currently in the floodplain, they now can go up to 42 feet in building height.
yes.
Correct.
Okay,
We're not making any change.
That's an
to
easier
the-
motion.
That's an easier motion.
yep. So-
Want me to repeat?
Yes.
Try that again?
Sure, try that again, Dennis.
Okay. Any commercial, industrial properties within the 1% floodplain are permitted to raise the height limit from 40 to 42 feet.
If they choose.
Just 2 feet's cleaner, because
Yeah, okay.
you got two outliers.
So we're really raising it 2 feet,
Feet.
period. That's
Yep.
really the basic of it.
Yeah, if you're in the 1%.
So in the 1% commercial, industrial floodplain, the building height is
Okay,
increased
nay.
by 2 feet.
Right, right. Okay.
If they choose to.
No, that's not.
No, there's no
No?
choice. It's not
if it's on
voluntary in the
the
1%.
They're
So
not
if
getting
they do
anything right
dry
now.
floodproofing, they can go up 2 feet? Is that what we're saying?
That is what
That's
you're
what we're
saying.
Oh,
They're getting 2
saying-
feet because they didn't get it
I'm
before.
going to vote no.
Now, if they go up to 36, that's a different story. Now, we didn't talk about that.
Let's hold on the motion for a second, because there's
Okay.
clarification, because we're still working on the motion. Bob,
Okay.
go ahead, your comment?
No, my comment is, if they go up in actual level, the 18 inches, then they get the additional height.
Right.
If they just floodproof and claim something else, then they don't.
that's my feeling too.
Why does that matter? They're still protecting their property. They have
Well,
two
they're-
ways to do it. If they don't want to
But they're
elevate,
already required to protect it.
they're already, they're already required to protect their property. But on the books, there's no allowance for an increase in height. We're not changing any of the requirement. We're just saying, somebody should have given you a carrot, a little carrot, when this was first put into place, and we'd like to acknowledge that. That's really all we're doing in the 1%. But Bob, you're saying only if there's a freeboard. In other words, only if they're lifting it up.
Yeah.
If they're just going to use some kind of technique to divert the water, then you're saying that's not enough to give them a height increase. Is that correct?
I feel
So
that
for my
way.
clarification, currently 18-inch freeboard or floodproofing is required.
Yes.
One or the other, yes.
Yes.
It's a FEMA standard. So what we want to incentivize them to do is raise it even more.
No, we're not incentivizing them. We're actually saying, thank you for doing the right thing. We wanted to give you a little credit.
Currently, they don't get any
They don't get
height.
anything.
They don't get
They don't get
any
any height.
commensurate height
Okay.
if
just
they
trying
do the
to-
freeboard.
Right.
Yep.
So now we're just trying to say, if you do the freeboard, you can get the 18, you can get 2 feet on your height.
So why don't we limit it to just freeboard?
Okay,
Okay.
I'm fine with
Then I
that.
think it's clear. Why don't we just deal with freeboard? In other words, let them, if they choose floodproofing, then they do whatever. But if they choose to elevate their building, we're going to give them height. There's at least a correlation between those two things.
I guess I wonder why that's the purview of this committee, because it's already 18 inches. If you wanted to incentivize an additional 18 inches to get it to a 36-inch freeboard and then give them 2 or 4, Dennis said we didn't talk about it, that, to me, is what this committee should be considering.
Right.
But
The reason it's the purview of this is being equitable, because we are going to touch on a voluntary basis the others. Okay, because I'm with you, like, why are we in this place? But because I believe we are going to address on a voluntary basis, if you're in the 500 year or outside of that, and if you elect to raise your building with an 18-inch freeboard, and you have no requirement now, we're going to give you a height. So then the 1% people could come back to us and say, how come you didn't give us anything? And our answer would be, because you already have to do it, sorry, you didn't get a credit. That seems like, okay.
I agree with Charlie, though, and that's what I thought we were doing last time, was talking about an extra 18, giving them extra height, but, you know, I'm okay with either.
So if we went back to that argument, which we've, I know we feel like we're in Groundhog Day,
Yeah.
but it's worth going through it. If we gave them, if we said you have, the current requirement stays 18 inches and no increase in height. If you elect to go higher, and your business can function that voluntarily to 36, we want to give you a carrot for that. The difficulty there is, from what I've been hearing, is a lot of the commercial nature of their businesses, it's going to be so expensive to let their customers to get into their buildings that few, if any, will avail themselves of it. So that's why the 36-inch came off the table for a while, at least.
I mean, I hear that, but I don't know how true that is. I mean, Brent's got a little bit more experience than I do in it, but I look at like office buildings that have 6 or 7 or 8 different companies in there, firms in there, and they would certainly put an ADA compliant ramp with elevators and all that, but
If we let them go taller.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is on that.
But if we let them go taller, if we do have an increase in height, are you saying, Janelle, that we would be violating the height standard of the city? If we put up 2 feet on top of existing, if we went to 36-inch, if we said a significant investment, you have to do the 1%. If you're in the 1%, you have to do the 18-inch. If we said voluntarily you went to 36, we want to really give you a carrot for that. Are we exceeding the building height of Lewis in any of the zones?
Well, you'd be establishing a new building height, just like you did for residential.
Just like we did for residential.
Just for residential, you're establishing a new building height within the floodplain.
Okay, so going back to Charlie's comment, if we don't touch in the 1% anything about what they currently have to do, so be it, they have to do it. If you take a much more of an investment and you, in the 1% floodplain, want to increase it to 36, we want to give you a big carrot. That would, then what's required stays. We're not touching what's required. We're now talking only in the voluntary world. And then the voluntary world be, hey, folks, in the 1%, if you go up 36, we're going to give you 2 feet additional. If you're in the 500, we're going to give you 18 inches, and we're going to give you 2 feet. And if you're in the non-regulated, if you go up to 18, we give you 2 feet. All of this then is voluntary. That says cleaner. We leave it as is. It's not in our scope to change building codes by this committee. But because we're trying to incentivize, here's how we would like to incentivize.
So the way I wrote it would be with an additional 18 inches of freeboard in zones AE and VE, and then it just has building height go up 2 feet. Mm-hmm. And then, because again, if you look at the table, it would just be an extra line. And then, and 18 inches in 0.2% and outside of the floodplain, everything's going up by 2 feet in building height.
Correct. And what I like about that approach is it's all voluntary, what we're recommending. But it's giving everybody, it's just saying in the 1%, you'd also have to go up 18 more inches than what you currently have. So you're really doing something different. And in the other two, you'd also have to go up 18 inches above what is currently required. So everybody has the 18-inch increase, and everybody has the 2 feet.
I like
I
that.
see the wheels in Dennis's mind turning that you've got 18 inches of freeboard required now in the commercial 1% flood zone, but with no height carrot.
Why should there be a carrot to comply with what's existing law?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a discussion for you
Yeah.
guys.
But, you
Yeah,
know,
if you think of-
compare that to the residential, it's the same thing in residential. You have 18 inches of freeboard and you don't have any elevation in height.
No, So in most places except for the R3, you have a maximum building height. So in the R2, R4, you have a maximum building height of 30 and a half feet. If you are within like the R1, R2, R4, R5, and you're in the floodplain, you can go up to 34 feet. R3, it's because you're already in the floodplain, you just get 34 feet. So there is, if we know you're, for the residential outside of the floodplain, I mean, inside the floodplain, you do actually get currently a bump in building height, if that makes sense. I feel like
The height was changed when the freeboard was added previously.
Yes. Yeah, when the city originally added freeboard to the 18 inches, they went from 30 and a half to 34 feet.
Everywhere? Or just R3?
No, everywhere, if you're in the floodplain, because again, if I have a house in R2, I have a maximum height of 30 and a half feet, unless I'm in the floodplain, and then I can go to 34 feet.
Anywhere? Any zone, anywhere? Because when they did that, some of the properties in the floodplain now weren't in the floodplain. So does it apply to everybody currently in the floodplain?
No, because that change was with the last map revision, and the maps haven't been revised since then.
I think it probably just goes back to the beach side, the R3, and not the rest.
No.
I don't know.
So, on the screen is the tables for the R1, R2, R3, and R4. And about near the bottom, about 5 up, you're talking about maximum building height. And again, if you're in a flood zone A and E, your maximum height is 34 feet. 34 feet or established building height. All other locations, again, outside of the floodplain, you're at 30 and a half feet. So when the city originally adopted the 18 inches, they gave everybody 34 feet if you're in the floodplain from...
Okay. So every zone got it.
I don't want to, not all the residential ones.
On the residential.
Residential side, I'm good with saying yes.
So on commercial, when they
Residential, when they did the 18-inch freeboard.
they got a height increase.
They got a height increase.
What took place there.
Yes, and that was yes.
But when the city decided to put 18-inch for commercial, it never had any height increase.
I was not here, I can't answer that.
Well,
There is no
obviously-
difference.
Obviously, it didn't.
It looks like it didn't, because there is no difference between
Right.
flood, non-flood for building height in the commercials.
But when that happened,
Because-
we didn't have a city plan or anything. That was before Tom West
Tom
as
West, yeah.
well.
But also to that point, you could drive floodproof at base flood elevation.
Okay,
So the carrot didn't exist.
right.
Or wasn't spoken of.
Because there
then.
was another way to actually protect
most
your
people,
property.
back then, were just going to drive floodproof and stay at base flood, so the height stayed the same.
Okay. So if a commercial building right now in the floodplain, to meet current code, if they came to you and said, I'm just going to flood-proof, I'm not going to raise my building,
40 feet.
40
building
feet.
height, because that's what the code is.
And if they comply with the 18 inches of freeboard, it's still 40 feet.
It's still 40 feet. Okay, well, then I go back to, I don't know, 17 motions ago or something. I think we should just deal with voluntary.
Is there a
think
motion
it's-
in the
I was going to
second
say,
one?
No,
There is
isn't.
not.
There's not a motion on the table. I'm just saying.
I withdraw my former motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't even
It never
seconded.
got seconded, so you're
was-
good, Dennis.
You're good.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Sorry,
seconded.
timeout.
There's no
We do
motion.
have one motion,
No.
and that's the motion to vacate.
Yes.
Right,
We
and
voted on that.
That one we voted on.
Okay.
That
So
was
it
done.
sounds like what you want to do is, if you're in the floodplain with an additional 18 inches of freeboard in zones AE and VE, you get 2 feet of building height. And in 0.2% and outside the floodplain, you can go up to 2 feet.
With 18 inches.
Yes, and 18 inches, yes.
So to clarify, we're not dealing with floodproofing, we're only dealing with freeboard. And we're only taking all zones, all voluntary, 18 inches over the current requirement. Okay. So we're uniform, we have some incentive, and we're being very consistent. And it's all voluntary. So if I have a commercial building in the 1%, in the 100-year floodplain, I'm required right now by the city to flood-proof, freeboard, 18-inch, and that stays. But if you want to double that by another 18 inches, voluntarily, we're going to say, hey, city, let them go up higher. And we're going to tell those in the other zones where there's been no freeboard requirement, we're going to say, if you voluntarily go 18 inches, we're also going to give you 2 feet in height. So our complete proposal is voluntary, consistent across all, 18 inches above what currently is there, with accordingly height increase.
But we're also saying that if you flood-proof, you don't get any elevation.
That's right. That's right.
Right, because it says freeboard.
Right. We're only dealing with freeboard.
I like it.
I mean, the planning commission may react, the public hearing could react differently and we could respond, but at least what we're proposing is digestible and consistent. And then this is where I think you want the public, you want the commercial developers who are property owners to say, I need more of an incentive. I know it's voluntary, but I'd like to do it, but I'd like to have a little more incentive to make sense for me.
Come up with an idea.
Yeah, and have them
Don't
come
you
up with
say,
an
"I
idea.
want it,"
That's
so,
right,
you
that's
know?
right, yeah. Okay, let's try that as a motion. Does somebody want to make that as a motion?
So,
Are you going to word it just so it says 2 feet additional, right? You're not going to say 40 or 42?
2 feet additional. We're going to say
Yeah.
it's voluntary across all zones. It's 18 inches freeboard above the current requirement, and it's an allowance of an increase of 2 feet of height.
somebody want to make that,
Well,
just say,
See, I prefer, the only thing that I would add to what you said is to start with exactly the areas that we're covering.
Okay,
So there's no confusion.
okay.
So what we're saying is in the commercial and industrial area,
I got you. How about attachment 4?
But I think it's good to use the
That's-
words in both, we're applying this to both commercial and industrial. I'm with you, Dennis, I agree.
I want clarity because I
Yep.
don't, it's so important.
So let's do it by floodplain zone, because that's really how we did residential. So in the 1%,
In the commercial,
in the
you got to
commercial,
identify what
I'm sorry, in the
zones you're
commercial,
talking about.
in the commercial industrial zones, all commercial and industrial zones in Lewis that have a current requirement of a freeboard of 18 inches, we're proposing a voluntary doubling of that to 36 inches with an increased allowance of 2 feet in height.
And that includes the LC, the LCH, the TC, the TCH, the MC, the GC, the I, the CH, the CF, HC, the CFE, and CF.
Voluntarily, 36 inch.
But you're outside, what about outside of the floodplain?
No, I just said that's the 1%. I mean, for clarity, I'm with you.
I missed that part.
Let's go by the 3 flood zone, regulated, non-regulated we have. So in the 1%, if you're in the 1%, we're proposing, you have a current code. We're saying voluntarily, if you increase your freeboard to 36 inches, there would be an increased allowance of an additional 2 feet in height. That's the first motion. The chair really shouldn't make a motion, though, right?
No,
Not
but
really.
But you can
I
adopt
move-
what she said.
You can,
I move to adopt what Amy just said.
okay. Is there a second for that? Dennis seconds? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. The next one is in the 0.2 or for all commercial and industrial, thank you for that, for all commercial and industrial,
Read them again.
for all
Read
commercial
them again.
industrial properties, for all commercial industrial properties. Bob, do you want to make a motion?
No.
Nope. For all commercial industrial properties that are currently located in the 0.2 or 500-year floodplain that currently have no requirement for freeboard, we are recommending voluntary participation to raise the freeboard to 18 inches, giving them an increased allowance of 2 feet.
Building height.
building height.
Make a friendly
Yeah,
amendment.
absolutely.
You said 0.2, the .02 or the 500-year floodplain, they're both the same thing?
Right. It's
So
just
it
some
would
of
be
you
the
like, we'll just do it.
0.02 or outside.
Well, yes, if you want to make the motion for both those together because it is identical, I'm with
Yeah.
you. I just thought you wanted to do 3 motions.
Oh, I was.
But I'm with you. They're identical, so we
Yeah.
might as well group them together.
We do them together.
Yep.
I would do it separately
Why would you do it separately?
because the .2 is a floodplain.
Because it is, and the other one's
And you're
non-regulated.
providing a freeboard.
I'm with you. I think you're right. You're right. Okay, so the second motion is for commercial industrial properties in the 0.2.
I move we adopt what Amy
0.2.
just said.
I'm sorry. Well, I said 0.2.
.02.
.2.
Point two.
It's 0.2. I said
0.2.
0.2.
0.2.
I said
.02.
0.2, sorry, I shouldn't say
No,
0.
you.
.02.
.02.
No,
No.
.2.
No,
It's 0.2, 0.2.
it's 0.2.
No, it's
0.2.
Percent.
.02 is the 5,000 year.
There are 3. There's 1%.
Percent.
It's 1%, 0.2%, non-regulated. Okay. I'd like someone else to make the motion for the, I want to hear that motion for the second.
So
There are 3, 0,
1%.
1%, 0.2%, no regulation.
What is 0.2?
the 500 year.
0.2 is 20%, is it not?
It is the 500 year floodplain.
Okay.
How about we just call it the 500 year floodplain? to-
0.2%, that's one thing.
0.2%.
You have to say the percent.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So
But I've been
for-
trying to get us away from just the 500
know.
because our expert here has said we've got to all start sounding like we're FEMA people. But I
So-
like them both, the way you did it for residential. You had the colloquial version in paragraphs.
Yeah, so it sounds like for the LC, the LCH, the TC, the TCH, the GC, the MC, the I, the CH, the CFHC, the CFE, and the CF, that if you're in the 0.2% and outside of the floodplain, if you do 18 inches of freeboard.
No, we're not
You
going
just-
to,
okay,
we're
you
not
just-
going to combine the motions. We're going
Okay.
to we're going to have 3 motions, okay? We already got the first one approved.
Well,
Just
you
stick-
guys were talking about combining, so it was
But
like,
there's a reason that Brent gave us of why we
That's
should do
fine.
it. So so don't combine them.
Not freeboard.
so then you just say that plus 2 feet of building height.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to read the motion. I'm going to state a motion if someone wants to refer to my motion. For all commercial and industrial properties in the city of Lewis who are located in the 0.2% floodplain. Okay? I'll wait till you catch up with me. Okay? We are voluntarily recommending establishment of an 18-inch freeboard with the allowance of a 2 feet in height.
Increase.
Pardon me?
Increase.
Increase. Do I have a second? Well, can I have that motion as a motion? So it's not from the chair.
You adopted it already.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, do I have a second for that? Oh, I'm sorry. I have to make a friendly amendment to that. That has to be very specific to freeboard. I think I said that, but it has to be specific to freeboard. Okay.
Yes.
I
And
did say that.
I move that it be specific to freeboard.
I don't know. Are you going to take it word for word, Joellen?
No.
Trying to.
Because when you talked about the voluntary part,
Yeah.
I thought it was a little confusing in that it's not that,
We're voluntarily recommending.
yeah,
is
you
that
said we're voluntarily
that they
recommending. We're recommending
Okay.
that they can voluntarily do
Okay.
this.
So somebody wants to make a motion to increase the building height in the LC, LCH, TC, TCH, and the rest on table 4, attachment 4, to 2 feet if they do 18 inches of freeboard.
Voluntarily.
Voluntarily in the 0.2% flood area.
That's it.
Correct.
Yes.
Joellen, you get that? If you can read it back, that would be great. If you got it. I mean, it's tough. It's tough.
Well, I think we're making it tougher than it is. The application is in all commercial and industrial. That's the first piece. The second piece is that we are stipulating an 18-inch freeboard with an associated 2 feet in building height. This action is voluntary. Like, let's make it so voluntary is not an adjective of anything.
Can we make the voluntary part at the front?
We could.
Just let me ask a quick question.
Really, if the people there they have an opportunity to voluntarily do this.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So, for all commercial and industrial properties in Lewis, 0.2%, parentheses, 500 year, that currently have no requirement for a freeboard, we propose providing a 2 feet height increase if they increase their freeboard by another 18 inches.
Yeah, by 18 inches. And I would reference all the zoning districts.
Yes, I just feel like you didn't have to say it all. We all know
Yeah, I
it's
know
all.
you-
But
I
I'm
just-
glad that you will reference it with attachment 4.
Yeah, because,
Really, I guess, Joellen, we have to, do you say everything on table 4, or do you do everyone individually?
so you want to do everything on attachment 4 plus the LC and the LCH. Because LC also allows for residential, so it's in with the residential, but it's also commercial.
Gotcha.
So attachment 4, you definitely want to update, and then the LC and LCH.
I did. Thanks, Dennis.
Do we have a second for that? Dennis seconds.
Okay, so Barbara moved to adopt what Amy said originally, and Dennis seconded. Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? No. Passes unanimously, minus Patrick, who is not here. We have one more motion because we have one other area. It's the non-regulated floodplain. So all you have to do is change the sentence that's in the 0.2%. So it's all commercial and industrial properties, okay? So you could read that, Joellen, from there, and you could make the motion.
And we'll correct it.
And I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will. I think the clock got us.
Okay, for all commercial and industrial properties outside of the 2%,
No, not 2%.
outside of it, outside of the,
Located in the unregulated floodplain.
okay.
No,
Yes, it's not the regulated floodplain. Well, what did we call it in residential? We called it the unregulated, we called it we called it for residential. Outside the regulated floodplain.
And the 0.2,
Yeah.
Everything else that's left.
Start again, sorry.
Okay, for all commercial and industrial properties located outside the regulated floodplain. Let me jump up to the other one. If they increase their freeboard by 18 inches, we will allow them to increase their height by 2 feet.
Instead of freeboard, I'd say finished floor.
You gotta put the word voluntary on it.
Okay.
Finished floor for this one.
Right.
Which is just what we did for residential,
Between
right.
that's why I was saying to separate the two,
Okay,
because there's no freeboard when there's no base flood.
right.
So, Joellen, what you might want to do, sort of type it up as a draft, circulate.
That's an excellent idea, Dennis, thank you.
See if we have some thoughts on,
Okay.
No,
we have to, we
reference
can
the trouble
correct it, we can
is-
correct it at
I
the
don't know
next
why
meeting.
we can, but I'd kind of like this one done. Because I would like it, I think we're so close, and I don't know why we're struggling this much. We're almost there. Let's finish this one, and then we'll move other things to the next meeting.
Okay, Amy, would you repeat that
So,
third one, please?
yes, so for all commercial and industrial properties located outside the regulated floodplains, property owners can voluntarily raise well, why are you saying no?
We're not raising, well, you're just, they can,
You'd raise the building height 2 feet if they
If they
provide,
can raise their building height by up to 2 additional feet if they install an 18-inch freeboard
18 inches above finished floor.
above finished floor. Sorry. Sorry, Joe. Sorry, we can't take your comment at this point. We can take it when we finish this.
And then I also have a footnote that it's voluntary and that the building height increase is not for floodproofing for buildings.
Correct?
I'm just,
Can you just send that, what you just said to me?
yeah,
Thank you.
somebody needs to second.
Dennis
Thank you.
seconds. Any other discussion? I have no problem if at our next meeting in January, we want to look at everything because we've struggled so much today. I think that's probably, maybe there's an opportunity to talk to some folks. I think that's a good idea. I just want us to get it to the motion state, okay? I'm not trying to close down. Okay. All right. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Okay, at this point, in the calendar year 2023, we have finished our work. Now, we will revisit this, so for the agenda for our January meeting, let's look at this again. Again, it's not going to anybody anyway for a few more weeks after that.
So
And it would be nice to have, Janelle, the attachment 4, so we have it actually written. I think that will be helpful.
I'll send it out. It's
Okay.
updated, so I'll send it out after the meeting.
Perfect. Okay. All right. We're over time, though. Who knows what the real time is? Yes, we're very over time. I just want to go over when our meetings are. And Barbara, I'm so sorry that we'll obviously move it to the next one. Janelle, I wanted to confirm when we're going to have the park. what is it?
January 22nd, Kay Carnahan is available. to
January
discuss-
22nd.
January
Okay.
22nd.
So let's just go over when our meetings are going to be starting. And we can decide, I want us to keep on a pace of about every 2 weeks, but we may slow that down for the workload that we're putting on the planning commission. I did talk to to the city planner. I did talk to Nancy Stacy, who said if you, Janelle, have lots of other things, she could ask Alex to sit in. So know that that's, you can manage that with the planning chair.
It's the other stuff to get to here
Okay.
is
Okay.
the issue.
Okay.
Amy, what I have is my notes from our November 20th meeting. We picked dates, we picked like 5 dates.
We did. I just want to confirm those, so everybody
Okay,
has them.
go ahead.
January 8th,
Yep.
January 22nd, February 5th, February 12th, and then we didn't go out any further. We'll see where we are. So Melanie, I wanted to ask you, are you still on? Sorry to keep.
Yes.
Melanie, are you going to be, when do you think you could get us just a draft dark sky ordinance in next year? Do you want me to put that on a specific agenda date of those?
Sure. Yeah, why don't we put it for that first January date?
Okay, January 8th? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so what we're going to do is we're really going to look at dark skies on January 8th, on the 20th. And if we get to it, we'll also be looking at Barbara's markup of the wetlands ordinance. On the 22nd, we're really going to make that wetlands day, okay? Because we're going to have another expert to come and speak to us, and Barbara has made comments, and we already have the CIB comments. However, there are a couple of actions that I think we need to do, and one of those is Brent. So Charlie, if you don't mind, he had to leave for a second. There are 2 questions. One is, the current ordinance does not address non-title, and CIB and others are saying we should address non-title. Perfect timing, Brent. So I would like to make sure that we have some mapping of non-title, because I would think the mayor and city council are going to say, we never addressed non-title, but we're going to address non-title now. What are we looking at? So is there a way to identify what is non-title in the city of Lewis?
Only the ones that we've
Discovered.
delineated from
Okay.
other projects.
I think
yeah.
first map might have some, but
Possibly, but they're also, the state is going through.
No, I understand the state is, but I thought CIB's comments were appropriate, that in our rewrite of the ordinance, we should address non-title. I was just anticipating somebody might say, well, where are they? Or what do you know of them?
That's the thing is,
Nobody's
Nobody
been looking.
knows.
sometimes they exist, sometimes they don't, depending on the
Okay.
state definition.
Okay, so why are you saying that there's a map Janelle, that you think you can
Well,
look at?
There-
First map
there-
has a map
They have
of,
state wetlands, not non-tidal.
they have wetlands, and sometimes it shows non-tidal, sometimes it doesn't.
I mean-
It's a very unofficial map.
Yeah,
I
Because nobody
would
has it.
base your language around it being delineated for the specific project that you're talking about. I
Okay.
don't know.
Our language
To
could,
to give you an idea, wetlands can convert to non-tidal wetlands within 3 months.
okay, so I hear.
And there's
Go ahead, Bob.
definitions of what's a wetland and what's a non-tidal wetland. And maybe we ought to dig them
Maybe we
out.
should look at those definitions. Okay, okay.
Okay, who's going to do that?
I'm going to take the action with the woman who came from CIB and have her propose. She's the one who's saying, Louis, I think you should address this. If you're going to relook at your ordinance, address non-tidal, let's at least get a draft definition that they might have.
Well, yeah, there's got, it's
Yeah.
not
There
a
is one
draft,
in the
there are
code.
definitions.
Well, I mean, let me get a definition that they are using for non-tidal.
Might be able to help you out with that.
I mean,
Okay.
you can do that, but when we do projects, we refer to a wetlands scientist, somebody who's trained in the wetlands delineation, and they actually go out there and determine if this strip of 3 feet is non-tidal wetlands versus this strip of 4 feet. And there are various,
I know somebody who used to do that.
yeah, there are various criteria, but.
So-
Okay.
you know,
Except that non-tidal wasn't important very long.
But it's now very
You know,
important because of the Supreme Court
It's
decision.
been
The
long, it's been
difference
important
wasn't very
for
important.
40
The difference-
years, yeah.
The difference was important. So I'm not thinking that our ordinance is defining, I'm just saying that if our ordinance includes it, we at least then.
So,
Our ordinance does not include non-tidal,
It does in the
It does.
definition. In the definition.
Because it
but it
says,
doesn't in our language. Okay, it's not interpreted that way. That's so interesting.
from the
What is-
boundary of all wetlands, so they did all wetlands to be both.
Well, then let's clarify. Melanie, is that your memory too? I don't know if she's still with
My
us.
memory,
Is
well,
it your memory
we
of
just looked at, in
Yep.
the planning commission, we just looked at a property that had non-tidal wetlands.
Yep.
So yes, they do exist here along White's Pond.
Right. They do exist, but, okay, let's just take as one of our actions in January is to look at whether when we amend or propose recommendations for an amendment, that we would look to make sure non-tidal is included. Okay,
to go back to a couple questions ago, there's not a map that's going to show you.
okay.
Exactly.
So if there's not a map, let's just make sure our language is there to protect the city, and just as Charlie's saying, by site, you would have a wetlands expert look at. But if it's in our definition, I want to make sure that it's clear that our ordinance addresses both tidal and non-tidal. And the Supreme Court decision has thrown a lot of this up in the air, which is why it's more important to be clear that we're covering both. Let's just look at the definition, and Bob, if you can help with a wetlands person as a definition, maybe this is an example of something that we help to look at our definition in addition to ordinance update. Okay. The other one is, Janelle, you made a comment about a take. If we look at the buffer change, which is, there are a lot of changes to the wetlands ordinance that be considered, but the buffer distance, the footage, is a big one. Sussex County has more than the city of Lewis. We're smaller than Sussex County, so we have land issues. But what is your concern about increasing the buffer zone?
So at the subcommittee, the wetland subcommittee that looked at this, did a lot of research, and this is why they got to where they were for all wetlands, is because you have some very narrow, shallow, small lots within the city of Lewis. So if you start doing 100 feet on a 100-foot lot, that property now has lost, you've taken the ability to do development on that lot, which you legally cannot do. It's considered a taking. So they thought the balance was 50 feet because the 75 and the 100 was getting too far onto smaller properties that left very little room to be able to do anything with.
So I understand that rationale, and I hope we can look at de minimis properties and give them that freedom. But developers that have come before the Planning Commission are never giving us more. They're only using the wetland buffer. No one says that I'm going to increase this because I care so much about the wetlands. So I feel like the minimum is becoming the maximum, and that's not the intent of protection of wetlands. So we might have to look at, just be thinking about this, we may have to be looking at something with a caveat for lot size of this and larger or something.
I remember a statement by, I think, Kay Carnahan at that time, that, we liked higher numbers, but we didn't think we could sell them to city council. Now, it's a different city council, too, so
Yes.
I think it's open to discussion.
Yeah, I think it has to be part of our discussion.
I mean...
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not saying it shouldn't be, I'm
Is
just
there a
giving
reason
you.
you should, I want to build in Lewis because they have a narrower buffer than the county? That's really not where we want to be.
Right.
Not taking sides on, I'm just providing.
You're just providing
some
the
background
rationale
as
that was
to,
done.
as part of the
Okay.
reason they went to 50, there was, I remember, I kind of think I'm sitting where Barbara was, about concerns about taking and going to 100 feet was definitely a concern as well.
Okay.
Well, I mean, then we could start to ask about how many properties that really is,
An example, there are 2 non-tidal wetland parcels within Mariner's Retreat. And nobody went in and the property adjacent to it, the Rollins property over on 4th Street, I'm sure there are some non-tidal wetland areas within that property as well,
That was an issue when Mariners Street was
and the buffer there.
approved, and there were arguments about the buffers off 4th Street
Yep.
and so on. But as I recall, and I was only watching the debate, I think the water table is like 2 feet down there. So I think the Supreme Court decision has opened up a lot of things for us to think about. And the speaker we had who was right, that everywhere it says wetlands, you better look at it and see whether that's tidal, non-tidal, and study it. And if we do it sooner, we'll be better off than later.
Also, just something to keep in mind was the last one only addressed new major subdivisions,
Correct.
so
Correct.
not existing properties.
Right, and our approach has really been, we're trying to do uniform recommendations across, and thank you for that clarification, because that's
So
not the
that's
scope.
That's the reason why that was kind of
Yeah, okay.
where it landed.
All right, so to just recap, when we reconvene on January 8th for the agenda, we are going to revisit the motions we made on commercial floodplain, flood management.
Building height.
Building height. That's the first agenda item we're going to have. And then Melanie's going to have a draft dark sky approach. Melanie, I'm not sticking you to the whole holidays, they have to write ordinances, but, what are the topics we need to discuss? And then we'll be paralleling wetlands and dark skies. On the 22nd, we will have, what's her name? Sorry, I can't keep remembering.
Kate Carnahan.
Kate Carnahan. We'll have her come, and the other topic we're going to have in these sessions is the pesticide. I have a woman who I saw do a presentation. She got her city in Ohio to actually go pesticide-free, and I'm going to see if she's willing to just come in and not come in, but virtually come and talk to us about hurdles. Did they just deal with glyphosates? What did they deal with? So I'm going to just see her availability, so she might pop in out of sequence. Okay? All right, any other comments from the public or anyone else online or sitting here?
Just sitting here, I think it's really neat that you're looking at the freeboard. I think that's really important. I was a little confused at one point.
Can't hear you.
Oops, you should come up to the mic, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Councilman Elder has a comment. Are you making a comment as Joe Elder, the citizen?
Joe Elder is a resident
Okay,
of
as a resident.
Park Avenue in Lewis, Delaware. I think it's great you're going in this direction. I was a little confused by a couple parts, but I could tell you're struggling to get it all worked out. And I wondered why when you're going up in freeboard, you're not going equidistantly up in height in all categories. It seemed like some categories gained a little extra. They might get 18 inches of freeboard, but they're getting 24 inches of height, whereas some got 36 inches of freeboard, but only 24 inches of height. And I wondered why it wasn't an equidistant arrangement. I was just curious.
Yep.
I'm thinking.
No, thank you for your comment, and I think when we see the table, we'll look at our logic.
Well, I think what you're doing is wonderful, and I think my opinion is.
Careful, be careful.
Yeah, be very careful. Don't have an
Be
opinion.
careful.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm
just
guessing.
wish us a happy holiday.
As a citizen, I'm guessing that a lot of folks might really like being able to opt in.
Okay, thank you for your
I
comment.
like that approach.
Thanks for your comment.
So we did have a comment from Trina Brown Hicks, wondering, will the voluntary recommendation affect their owner's insurance if they don't voluntarily go with the recommendation?
That's a good question.
I don't believe so, because the insurance companies aren't going to necessarily pay attention to a voluntary. Plus, it's something that they can have a conversation with
It's almost a case by case with
their
an agent.
insurance agent beforehand.
Yeah. If they have insurance, right? If they have a mortgage, if they have
They're
insurance, there are a lot
not-
of other factors. Right,
They're not following code,
right.
so it's not a detriment to that.
Okay. December 12th is the public hearing. What time is the public hearing? It's at 6 PM at the Rollins Center. Okay. And I know, Brent, I'll give you some feedback. I know that Janelle and Charlie and Brent are the officials who are presenting the recommendations, so that the mayor and city council can hear those details. One of the comments that I don't know, Brent, if it's going to come up in your presentation, but Dennis and I have chatted about, it's probably part of the public outreach and education going forward. Some people are going to be interested in, but what if I've had damages? So you might get that, and I know you're really prepared for that. And we'll add it to our list for public education, but because you'll be discussing it, the public or the mayor and city council may say, well, yes, I hear you talking about new building or renovation, but what about a building that's had damages? What happens to them? What does FEMA do? Does that capture it, Dennis?
Yeah, the reason this came up is a discussion I had with someone over on the beach. And the FEMA regulations regarding substantial damage and substantial improvement were adopted by the city back in '77. And in the purpose section of 197-73, it refers to substantial improvement. And then when you look at the definition of substantial improvement, that's where it also covers the substantial damage. So currently, if a property sustains substantial damage from a storm, and if the cost to get it fixed, repaired, exceeds 50% of the value of the house, not the land, then you have to come into compliance with all the current ordinances. Currently, if you don't have 18 inches of freeboard, you're going to have to come up to 18 today. By our proposal, you not only would have to come up to 18, but 36. So you're only adding 18 inches to what exists. And I think that's incredibly important to present, because I've had this discussion, and I didn't make much headway in explaining that it's only an increase of 18 over what already exists. And there are a lot of people that don't understand that it's a FEMA regulation, it's not a city regulation. Now, the city regulation previously was cumulative over 10 years, and we did get that reduced to the 1-year FEMA. So I think it's really important that that piece be understood, and as you say, added to the educational piece. But it took me a long time to understand it thoroughly. And I've worked with it for a while, so I can't imagine that many people in the floodplain understand it at all. And it's really important.
Understand, and you'll hear me sprinkle in FEMA requirement.
Yeah, I mean,
Every-
you have to.
Every fourth sentence.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's in
took
there.
It took me a while to find exactly where in our zoning ordinance at 19773, what language tied all of that together.
Honestly, I say this as politely as I can. Delaware is not to the point where Maryland is with their language. In Maryland, I've done a couple of floodplain ordinances, and I think the last one I did was 37 pages just for the floodplain ordinance, which sprinkles in all sorts of FEMA requirements.
I think Dennis's point, which, just to reiterate, is when you are making that presentation on behalf of all of us,
I will sprinkle in FEMA
really
requirement,
say,
FEMA
so much
requirement.
of this is
Yeah.
FEMA,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
clarifying, here's
This is
what.
not optional, this is not
Yeah.
Lewis being
Right.
Big Brother, this is FEMA requirement, no option.
And it's in our code.
And it's in our code.
In our code when we adopted the
Yeah.
FEMA back in 77. And that's where it all comes from. And I think some people will want to argue with the city as to why it's there. And that's why I think it's incredibly important to say, this is when the city adopted the FEMA regs umpteen years ago, 50 years ago, that's when this went into effect.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know it's there.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion, because sometimes we assume our audience knows what we're talking about, and they don't, so, thank you, Dennis.
Right, and kind of the current state too. Here's where we are now. I mean, I think it's, here's
Right.
where we are now.
We're only adding
We're only
18
adding, right. It's
to what
really-
exists.
It's a modest change, quite honestly, even
and-
though it takes us, a while to get there. But it's a modest change. It's FEMA Big Brother, and then we're making modest changes to protect the property. I think it's important. Last item. So I'm taking all these footprints home to type them up over the holidays. Joellen, can you set up a meeting, if you can do it before the holidays, great. If not, early January, with the 4 individuals, and maybe we have to get that other name from Janelle, the woman who came to the public meeting who said she wanted to help on this. All we want to do is let them see what they're handling. They don't have to do anything with these until the new year, but they have to get a sense of what they're going to have to sew or quilt, which is way outside my capabilities. Way outside. I'd be stapling or gluing. And that's not good. But we want it done by Earth Day for Mayor and City Council. And I need to summarize all of these. Many of the footprints have 2 or 3 messages. So it's like 500 footprints, but sometimes it's 3 messages. So I'm going to type them up and categorize them just so you have them as a baseline. But also Mayor and City Council has them because they're driving a lot of what we're doing.
Yes, I'll be glad to do that. And if you give me my envelope, I'll start typing up mine as well.
All right, I'll be happy to share that envelope with you. All right, is there any other business anybody wants to raise? No? Well, I just thank all of you as colleagues. This has been a very aggressive 7 months of collaboration and your insights and clarification. We are better as a group than any one of us individually. I think that's true of a lot of teams, but I really feel it is this team. I so rely on all of you for your individual perspectives and also the amount of time you're taking as volunteers. So thank you. Thank you all. Hang in, okay? Don't. We've had people who want to join. I'm like, no. We have a very good team right now.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Yes, I concur. I think it's been great. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Your
I'll make 'em-
leadership is terrific.
Today was a little bit not as clear. I think the clock threw me off. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I love that clock.
That raising clock.
And the microphones.
And the microphones, yes, and thank you for those online coping
Yeah.
with the microphones. That
So
was
I'll make a
terrible.
motion to adjourn.
Good. Dennis Reardon, motion to adjourn. Second. By
Second.
Bob. Yes, all right. Happy holiday, all in favor, yes, you don't have to vote on it.
And happy holidays.
Happy holidays,
everybody.
everyone. And Janelle, thank you, Charlie and Brent, for supporting this. And Kate, not that she's listening in, but if you see her over the holidays.
She texted me, she's going to be visiting soon. She just, while we were in the meeting, I said, I'm in an environmental subcommittee.
And again, apologize it went longer today. All right, happy holidays, everyone.